Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Monday. I am here and I am talking. Well, today's show is going to be a little bit different. I know I said menopause was going to be the subject, but that'll be for tomorrow. There was a bit of a hiccup in that. And yeah. So today so I pivoted. I pivoted and decided, is that even a word? I decided to pivot and considering the world happenings of the weekend, I decided to do a show on the Pope. So whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, a believer, whether you're a Christian, a Baptist, a Methodist, a Catholic, um, the Pope leaves something behind for everybody. And that's really what I want to talk about. So even if you're a non-believer, even if you're, like I said, whether you're an agnostic, an atheist, not a Catholic, um, if this interests you, I really, really would like you to stay on, because there's some things that I was reading today that I couldn't even write it down. And some of it I'm going to read because it was a perspective, right? This is the Aloha perspective. And part of perspective is the perspective of what other people, are feeling and thinking and their experiences in religion. Muddy told me some stuff. Good morning, Sammy. Muddy told me some stuff about her own church. And, and it was, when we talked about it, I mean, like I said, I don't want to share it until, unless I have permission, but it was just kind of like, wow, really? Really? And so that's why I wanted to talk about Pope Francis. Whether you are a believer or a non-believer, this is a man who fought for social justices. This is a man who took woke to a new level. And like I said, we will talk about that. It's about being open-minded, empathetic. It's about being kind-hearted. The whole meaning behind woke, which again, I'll do a different show on that, is about, you know, facing social injustice. So, Sammy says I have permission, and I think one of the things that blew my mind was basically that I guess their church had to move. Now, I can't remember all the details. It was a conversation we had last week, but she said a lot of the people that left were, well, I don't want to I don't want to just jump out and say it, okay? Because I don't want to lose people early in the show. So I'm just going to say, um, a lot of the people that left are kind of going to be the people that I talk about today. You know, the people who are kind of hypocritical, really, in their own beliefs. And it's not for me to judge, but you know what? I'm pulling off the mask today. And if it gets judgy, I'm sorry, because I was raised a Catholic, and there's a lot of things with Catholicism that I didn't agree with. And I have to tell you, as much as I love Pope John Paul II, because he was the Pope for such, like, basically my entire childhood, a good chunk of my adulthood. I mean, I was 32 years old when he died. And then Pope Benedict came in, and that guy, ugh, no, no, I'm sorry. I never liked Pope Benedict. I know a lot of people did, because he went back to kind of being like old traditional, like pre Pope John Paul II. And it's like, no, we are in the 21st century, and religion has to start learning how to keep up with that. And we can't just pick and choose what we want to out of the Bible and decide that that's okay. So some of the stuff I want to share today are just some notes that I had. And then this morning, I saw an article, and it said, it was, what was it called? It's called A Black Man's Thoughts on the Leader of the Catholic Church. And I really liked it, because I mean, this guy does not hold back. He just says it all. But he was raised a Baptist, okay? So I'll get to that stuff a little bit later. But I'm just, I'll give you my thoughts after and probably during, but I'm just going to say it now. If you call yourself a Christian, you need to act like one. All right. Like the guy, one of the reasons I wanted to share this about, the black man's thoughts on, and that's the title of it. I'll put it in the comments, and I don't want anyone to be offended by what he said. I don't want anyone to, what I want is for people to think about what he said. If it doesn't resonate with you, then you don't need to worry about it. If you get offended, you might have to think about it. Okay, and ask yourself why. Because a lot of times when we get offended by something, it's because it's that shadow again, right? It's that shadow coming up and sitting there smacking us upside the face to see something that we don't think we normally see, or that we don't want to see, because we don't want to believe that part of us, can think that way. But sometimes we get that way. Thank you, Muddy. I will. You know me. Give me a pulpit. There I am. But yeah, so and yesterday, just really quick, yesterday, I was invited by one of my best friends, Jessie, to go see or to go, sit in on her rehearsal for the San Diego Women's Chorus. Now, the San Diego's Women's Chorus is a big part of the LGBT community. But they are, a lot of them are LGBTQ LGBTQ, and a lot of them are just straight allies like myself. But yeah, I was beautiful, beautiful. But what I loved is a lot of their music is very feminist based. Now, I've never really considered myself much of a feminist. It's very possible that I am. I don't know. People seem to call me one. I'm not sure, but I know that I do get tired of, I there are just things I get tired of, and some of the ways that we think nowadays, that are so outdated and not even funny. In fact, it was funny because baby sibling and I were talking this morning, and my nephew indirectly, I should say, added something that I didn't even put. I put next to one of my notes, but I added what he said to his mom about the Pope, and they're not Catholic, but um it goes to show what a big impact the Pope had on people. I mean, I believe they would probably identify as Christians, but they're starting to go to church, they're starting to, just kind of lean in that direction. And I'm going to cover where I'm at, which is kind of where the article, the guy that wrote this is. So I'm actually going to start with his stuff. So he was just talking about all kinds of different things and how people are. And one of the things that I found interesting was he says, um, he talked about Pope John Paul, which, just really didn't affect his life because, but this guy is probably close to my age or near it. But, he was just kind of like, yeah, it just didn't affect me. I was raised Baptist in the South, the deep South. And it was just kind of like, yeah, and then he's all like, and then there was Pope, Benedict, which he and I felt the exact same way. Like, yeah, no, no. And then he says, the next Pope was different. Part of the reason I became disillusioned with religion is because Christianity, especially the white version, was so hypocritical. It felt like they ignored all the turn the other cheek and cast the first stone stuff to focus on hate and exclusion. Um, they focus on hate and exclusion, cherry picking the sins they wanted to focus on while ignoring their own sins. Pope Francis was all about loving everyone. Where I'm from, love the sinners is often used in a polite way to take a shot at someone. Sounds like bless your heart, right? Sammy, you're going to have to give me some 411 on that bless your heart stuff. But Pope Francis meant it. We are all sinners. We should all love each other. So and then he goes on to write, this is most apparent with the LGBTQ community. Christians and politicians love to make them a target for hate. Pope Francis said, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Thank you. Thank you. Because here's the thing, the chorus that I went to yesterday, guess what? They rehearse in a community church, an LGBTQ community church, a church that says, hey, you know what? We're all here to love one another. And we don't care if you're an ally or if you're part of the community, like LGBTQ. We don't care. Just come and love us. Let's just all love God together or love whoever we worship together. And that's what church should be. That's what community should be. That's what Sammy's church is like. They welcome everybody. They welcome everybody because everybody is welcome. And come on. If we break it down, Jesus was a damn hippie, right? I don't mean damn in a bad way. I mean, Jesus was a hippie. Not even a flower child. Jesus was a hippie. I'm a flower child. Jesus was a hippie. Okay, but people don't want to see that because we have all these versions of what a hippie is, right? From the 60s, and the things that people my age have read in books and what we've heard from other people. as a side note, let's sidebar for a second, okay? Um, Sibling is she is a child of the 60s, like a legit child of the 60s. Her entire formative years were in the 60s, okay? And so she loves her tie dye, and she was wearing a tie dye shirt. I can't remember if it was from one of our trips that me and my soul sisters took or what, but she was wearing a tie dye shirt, and she sees a gentleman in a Vietnam hat, at a Vietnam veteran hat at Disneyland. So she starts walking up to him, and I will say, bless her heart, in a nice way. His wife is like, "Well, what do you want?" Because you know they were treated so poorly when they came back. My dad is a Vietnam veteran, and he was telling me, I mean, I'm not sure how much of a brunt of it he got, but, he's like, it was just terrible how people treated him when they came back, throwing shit at them, literally, just spewing crap at them. And, I mean, these men were fighting a war for two governments, and some of them came back terribly messed up. They could have used some compassion and empathy. And I can't say we because I wasn't there, but this country lacked that for them. And I think that kind of caused a divide, right? So all these years later, this woman is just like, "What do you want?" And of course, I'm bristling because it's like, "Don't you talk to my sister that way." Mm-mm, mm-mm. And I'm standing behind her, and Sibling just ignores her. And she walks up to the man, and she puts out her hand, and she's like, "I just wanted to thank you for your service." And the woman just looked like she did not. I mean, she looked like she was about to come out of her skin, and then all of a sudden her skin just crumpled. And I just looked at the girl and I said, "Don't judge a book by its cover." I said, "My sister loves everybody." I mean, and so, and I love that story. I love that story because it just goes to show that sometimes we become so bristled by life that we forget that not everybody is going to be mean. And I absolutely 100%. I mean, I was mad at the woman, and you know what Sibling told me? She said, "Don't be mad at her. She's just protecting her husband. She's just protecting this person because of how they were treated for so long." And so sorry about that, guys. It's trash day. But even she, turn the other cheek while I'm sitting there like, "Let's go, lady, let's go." So, we were both very protective of our people. But anyways, but yeah, what he talks about here, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Love Pope Francis. And it says, although this isn't glowing support, it is a major step coming from the Pope. People who hate LGBT people for living should not claim Christianity as their reason. He criticized demonizing other groups as well, including the current administration's hatred toward immigrants. He cared about the poor and warned against the dangers of capitalism. I admit I fall into the capitalism thing sometimes, but I'm also not really sure I actually understand capitalism. So, I'll do my homework on that one. But of course, some people, especially in America, tried to make it political. Of course, being kind to everyone is somehow political. No, it's not. And look, I'm going to tell you right now, as much as I love the Pope, there is a separation of church and state, and I do not believe an executive order should have been signed to lower the flag's half-staff for the Pope. I love the Pope. I would have lowered my own flag for him because I don't need an executive order from anybody to do that. But there is a separation of church and state. The Pope does not represent everybody. Yes, he represented over 1 billion Catholics in this world, but there are a lot of other religions out there. And here's the thing. If you like the current administration, you will sit there and you will defend it. Now, had it been anybody else that had done this, they would have been like, "Well, that's not right. That's, we have the separation of church and state." So people will double down and defend what they want to defend. It's as simple as that, whether they know it's right or wrong, and whether they choose or not to see it. And that's why I wanted to share this man's perspective, because he's not wrong in a lot of ways. He's not. I'm going to share another story a little bit later, okay? Because this is going to roll into racism somehow. Pope Francis defined conservative as someone who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It's a suicidal attitude, because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another to be closed up inside a dogmatic box. So there's that dogma thing, right? So Pope Francis admitted mistakes. He encouraged the followers to speak up if they disagreed. He was the human pope. He was a pope who stood for the type of Christianity I yearn to see in the world. When he died, I felt it. I have never prayed so hard in my life for a pope not to die. Ever. But I mean, he was in his late 80s, and, God bless him. Seriously, this man was told to not leave the hospital. I told Sibling, I said, I think he knew he was dying. I think he knew his time was coming. And instead of staying in the hospital to die amongst, the cardinals and the bishops and all the other papal hierarchy, he went out amongst the people. And I guess he probably caught a cold or something, which just intensified what he was already going through. And then, not long after, he crossed over the papal bridge. So let's think about that. Now, I have no problem with conservatives. I know a lot of conservatives, but most of the conservatives I know, well, some, I should say, not most, some, a very small handful, actually, of conservatives I know have an open mind. They have an open mind. They don't have a problem with the LGBT community. They don't have a problem with, immigrants getting due process. They don't have a problem with, a lot of things that, heavy conservatives do. Um, in a way, if you want to tie that in, liberals, to me, the far left and the far right are no different. I mean, they're so far on their ends, they're coming around the other side to meet each other. And that's part of the problem because they seem to be the most vocal. And then you have everybody else that's kind of over here, right? Where we're all just kind of like, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just love one another? That's what the Pope wanted. That's what the Pope wanted. Um, he I heard, I didn't see the funeral. I tried. I fell asleep. But I heard that, the card, I think it's the cardinal that did the mass. Because I think that's the hierarchy, right? It's like a priest, a monsignor, a bishop, a cardinal, the pope. And he was talking about, a lot of things. He was calling some people out. I'm not going to say who because I don't want to get in trouble. But he's got, he was calling someone out about their border policies and shipping people off. So here's the thing. I dare you to Google the El Salvador prison, okay? Because it's crazy, icky. And we as a country are paying these people to hold these people, okay? A lot, millions of dollars to hold people who aren't even prisoners. They just escaped into our country. Now, they'll sit there and say, oh, they were gang members or they're this. They're still trying to get back a guy who was none of these things. In fact, one of the reasons they arrested him was because they had a tattoo, but the tattoo was for autism. Okay. He was not part of the whatever gang it was. I remember learning about that in criminology class, the gangs, the different gangs, but he wasn't part of them. And here's the thing. If you're going to ship off those kind of gangs, why aren't we shipping off the Proud Boys? Why aren't we shipping off the KKK? Because it's very clear who some of them are. They stand on bridges with all their signs. Okay, why isn't ICE coming for them? Because they're coming for our own citizens. There was a gentleman in San Diego who doesn't live very far from my dad's city, and it's about one city down. And ICE was at his door, going, hey, hello, and he's like, I was born and raised in San Diego. What the hell? And then they're like, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. But he's all, what about all the other people? What about all the other people who are here on green cards and visas? This is supposed to be a country of opportunity. This is supposed to be a country that is open to the world. Do we have criminals? Yeah. And most of them are homegrown. Sorry, I hate to break it to you, but most of them are homegrown. I actually asked somebody not that long ago, how bad must a country be for you to walk over 1,000 miles for a chance at a better life? Just a chance. Not even guaranteed, but just a chance. People save up thousands of dollars to try to squirrel their families into this country. And, I'm not saying that that's the right way to go. I mean, there is a due process for sending people out, there's also a due process for getting people in. It's an immigration thing. But, you know, I'm not here to tell you how to think about immigration. I just really want to point out to people and ask them, how bad must something be for someone to walk basically thousands, I don't know, hundreds of miles, sometimes over 1,000 miles for a chance at freedom, just a chance. Think about that. One of the reasons I became disillusioned with religion is for the same reason the guy did. You know, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I get judgy from time to time, but I've noticed that since I did a lot of my shadow work, since I've done a lot of my healing, my judginess has kind of curtailed itself, because a lot of times now when I find myself doing something like that, I sit there and go, "Ooh, what's inside of me that's getting this?" But there are some things in this world that I'm still very fucking judgy about, and I'm going to apologize for it. I am not. I am not. Because there is a difference between right and wrong. And we are really flirting with the line of wrong. In some cases, we've already passed over it. At, excuse me, as a excuse excuse me, as a country. But pardon me. See, when you start talking about the hard things, truly believe this: the bad things will always try to poke you to just quiet down, to not share your truth, to not share your, you know, your own opinions on what you feel is happening in the world right now. I don't like it. I don't. But I read something, there's this book I'm reading, and it says to choose this path is to choose a path of positivity. And I was like, some of the stuff I post, I think I post it as an in your face. Why can't you see this? Why can't you open your eyes to this? Why can't you trust that this isn't the right thing to go forward? People will latch on to things that they are comfortable with. They'll latch on to things that they believe. People will double down on things when they're angry at the world. And sometimes somebody will come in who's a high figurehead and they'll give them a reason to be angry. But I'm with this guy. I'm with this guy. How can we, you know, be the people, turn the other cheek, you know, cast the first stone? I mean, that's just the thing, right? If you're not familiar with the casting the first stone, it's like ye who has not sinned may cast the first stone, you know, and that's in the Bible. I may not have gotten the quote right, but that's in the Bible, because somebody did something wrong and everyone's standing there waiting to stone them to death. And somebody, maybe it was Jesus, I can't remember. I'll be honest with you. You know what? It's been a long time since I've been in Catholic school, and it's been a long time since I've gone to church. But yeah, but steps in and says, excuse me, you know, and I think the best way we can equate that is people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner, I'm sure, in every way. This show could go so much differently, but you know, Sammy gave me the go to preach. So I'm telling you how I feel. So here's some of the things about Pope Francis, because I did say we were going to talk about Pope Francis, and we kind of have been, but we're going over the things that he felt, that he really believed in. Pope Francis was the first pope from the Americas. He was from Argentina. And I mean, that's an incredible feat, because most of them have all been from Europe, you know. And so to come from a different continent and to bring, I believe he was a Jesuit priest, to bring his own beliefs into the Vatican. I mean, this is a man who was, you know, lived in a continent where, you know, there is poverty. Now, Buenos Aires, I don't think it's that bad. Argentina is a beautiful country. I've never been there, but I've seen videos, I've seen pictures, I've seen the Olympics. But but no, but seriously, you know, he lived very minimal. He was a very minimalist type of person. So let's see. First thing I wrote down, Pope Francis. What can we learn from him? I should have started with that because I've been sharing a lot of what I think we could learn from him. He was the first Jesuit priest to become a pope. Um, and he overcame fierce resistance to reshape the Catholic Church. I talked about how at my last job, there were a couple of us Catholics that existed in this office, and I was talking to two of them. I think the only two, that were really kind of still practicing, and I wasn't practicing anymore. But we all sat there and talking. I'm like, oh yeah, I love the Pope, and they're like, yeah, I don't like him. And they were very traditional. So now here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing. One was older than me. One was younger than me. Okay, one was just around older siblings' age. The other one would probably have been just a little bit younger than baby sibling. So, but neither one of them liked him, and I was like, well, why? And they're all, well, he's too, they never really gave me a good reason. They just said he's too non-traditional. And I said, but that's what makes him great. I said, that's the best part about him is the fact that he's trying to bring this church into the 21st century, and I always wondered what my mom would have thought about Pope Francis because my mom died about a year into his papacy. So I've always been curious about that because my mom could be pretty open-minded, but she really did follow what the Catholic Church said. And I do believe that she would have been like, well, if the Catholic Church says we can, we can. So, and the whole point is that I've known gay Catholics, and I've known gay Catholics who, it was probably an open secret in their church, in their community, but they never ever said it out loud because they did not want to be kicked out of church because, their Catholicism was so much more important. And that's what I love about what the quote said that, who am I to judge? Who are we to judge? If someone is seeking God, who are we to judge? I'm not here to tell you whether or not to believe in God. There are going to be people out there who are, and I know atheists, I know agnostics, and I know believers. And I love them all. I love them all equally because everybody is entitled to their opinion. But since we're talking about the Pope now, I like that, he didn't back down. He did face fierce resistance in the Catholic Church to bring it. And that's what I told my friends that I was talking, my coworkers I was talking to, and I said, I love the fact that he is bringing this church up to date. And one of the things they said, well, we like it traditional. And I said, well, if you like it traditional, are you willing to do Mass in Latin? Because that was changed, I believe, in the 60s, the 50s or 60s. They decided to go to whatever language of the country they were in. In America, we have, depending on the community, we have English masses, we have Spanish masses, we have English masses, we have Vietnamese masses, we have English masses, we have Filipino masses, we have English and Asian, English and Spanish, English, and there's actually a church near my house. It's the Pope John Paul Church, the second, and it's very tiny, and I think they actually have a mass in Polish. So, it's a very small church. I mean, it's very small. It could fit inside a grocery store, that kind of small. But, but that's the thing. It's the community. God doesn't care what language you speak. But apparently as humans, we do. Right? And yet some of us are so arrogant that we go to other countries and we expect them to speak English. It's like, no, you're going to their country, you learn the fucking language. All right? Even if you butcher it, at least show that you tried. Okay, don't be that person that goes over there and thinks you own the world because you're from America. No. All right, you respect other people's countries, period. I know most people do that. I know all the people watching this are going to be like, I already do that. Yeah, that's great. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to all the people in the back who probably will not see this show. And, and it's like, I'm telling you. So anyways, he sought to reform the church by tackling elitist mentalities among the clergy, demanding a compassionate approach to divorce and gay Catholics and insisting that the church welcome everyone. Now, that's just being very specific when it says, compassionate approach to divorce and gay Catholics. I'm sure there was a lot more to that, but that was his thing. And that has been a big thing. If you were Catholic and you were gay, you did not say a word. You did not say a word. It was basically don't ask, don't tell. If you were divorced, you could either be excommunicated or you could no longer be married in the Catholic Church unless you had that marriage annulled. And sometimes things don't work out, right? What happens if somebody gets married and it's a very volatile relationship? It just suddenly becomes volatile and you get a divorce. So you're being judged because you decided to save your life. We don't think about that, do we? All we think is that, oh, divorce, it's so bad. Yeah, well, and I think nowadays too, sometimes people are just, they jump into things, without really knowing. I mean, if you know, you know. I have no problem with that. I was talking to someone not that long ago who said, oh, yeah, they knew each other for 2 seconds and, a month later they were married and they're still married like 20 years later. That's great. There's a couple I read about not that long ago, and they didn't even really have a first date. They met, they got along, they worked together, they got married, and then I think they had their first date, and they've been married for almost 25 years now. So if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, don't. Here's the thing: don't get married just to be married. Okay, I almost did that. I did not, but I almost did that. I was engaged once a long, long time ago, and I knew it was wrong. And I think the only reason, to be honest, I can say it now because I was embarrassed to say it then. The only reason I said yes was because this person proposed to me in the middle of a restaurant and I did not want him to be embarrassed. And then I spent the next 2 weeks trying to figure out how to get out of it. Meanwhile, he was making plans and I was kind of like, yeah, okay. And that was wrong of me because that was kind of giving false hope. But if you knew the story, you might say he had it coming. But as an adult and as somebody who is trying to be a better person and to live a better journey, I don't want to be vindictive. That smile does not say that, does it? No, I did. I wrote it out and I thought, wow, but and in a way, hey, if you want to be okay with he had it coming, he did have it coming. But you know what? That's okay because I made up for it later. And there was a lot that we talked about, and I turned the other cheek. I turned the other cheek, and I just said, you know what? I said, you need to learn something from our failed relationship, because if you don't, you are never going to be happy. And he listened. Who knew? He listened, right? And I was bitter about it for a long time. I mean, this guy went off, and there was a lot to it, but there was a lot that I was really kind of forced to do. And then this person went, turned around. It's kind of that thing where the women always joke that they make the men better for the next person, and I did. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm not patting myself on the back, but I did that several times. And I think that's sometimes why it hurts when you're single, because it's like you did all this stuff. You see all these people thriving and living happy lives, having families, and you're just kind of like, did God forget me? Did the universe forget me? But sorry, that's another sidebar. But anyways, I love that. He sought to reform the church by tackling elitist mentalities. Churches should not have elitist mentalities. It should be open to everybody. Everybody should be able to be who they are, celebrate who they are as a human, live their life openly, and still be able to worship the God that they love so much. And I don't give a shit what you say. I know a lot of people don't like, well, God gave you this body. How can you want to be something else? Sometimes mistakes happen. Did God make a mistake? No. Maybe their soul just didn't get wiped clean from the last life they might have had. I mean, maybe someone was a boy in the last life and they came here and they're like, wait, I should still be a boy, and they're born a girl. Or maybe they were a girl in the past life and their slate doesn't get wiped clean before they come back into poof to have another life. And they're like, wait, who are we to judge? Why do we care so much? Does it affect our lives? No. Is it affecting? I mean, it might affect some people's lives who might be related to them, but why should it matter to you if this person is happy choosing what they're choosing? Think of it on a very different level. Think of it this way. You grow up in a family of doctors and you feel like you have to be a doctor, but you want to be a lawyer. But you're not given that choice. And so you decide, nope, I'm going to break free and I'm going to be a lawyer, and everybody gets mad at you, right? And that's a very different level, but that's that's the kind of level we normally think of. Now, put yourself in that person's shoes when it comes to, how they identify. Who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? Save that for your higher powers. Seriously, because when you have not sinned, yeah. So the next one, he also tackled financial corruption in the Vatican and clerical sex abuse, including laws to hold bishops accountable for cover-ups. Somebody watched the movie, right? I can't remember what movie it was. I know I own it, but it just totally slipped my mind. But yeah, it was Boston. It was a Boston article that blew everything. It blew the top right off of the Catholic Church. I mean, the Vatican's roof was hanging about 20 feet above the actual building because yeah, they blew the lid off. And I'm grateful that there was finally a pope that was willing to tackle this. Not just cover it up, not just say, "Oh, we're perfect." Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. I mean, how often do we see clergy of any religion being arrested for nefarious acts and whatnot? And something needed to be done because there's a lot of people with PTSD or CPTSD that left behind for all this, right? With all this. And I'm not sure if it ever touched my particular school and church that I went to. I can hope it didn't, but you never know. So I don't know. I can't speak to that because I don't know. But I like that he did tackle the financial corruption and the cover-ups and the abuse because that needed to be done. That needed 100% to be done. And he was a person who was not afraid to go up against everybody else and say, "Look, I wouldn't be surprised if he said, 'I'm the Pope. You voted me in as the Pope. You conclaved me in as the Pope. So you were going to listen to me.'" You know, here's another one of my favorites. He shunned luxuries. He shunned the Vatican luxuries. Um, Now, to each their own. If you're a pope and you want to live in the papal palace, hey, by all means, do your thing. Okay, but I really respect the fact that he shunned the papal luxuries, the Vatican luxuries. What I was talking about with my nephew earlier is he was telling his mom, he's like, "Mom, did you know that the Pope died with only like $100 to his name because he wouldn't take a salary? I think he took just what he needed to live, to get by." And so that was pretty impressive. He wouldn't live in the Vatican. He actually lived in an apartment just off of the palace, which was a guest house. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, which was actually the guest house. So yeah, he wouldn't live in the Vatican. Again, he was the first pope from the Americas as well. So those are all my notes, plus everything I talked to you about before. Um, and this is Victoria Ferreira. I believe she was from Brazil, but I really loved her quote. "He filled us with love, with empathy, with hope, and I think we need to more than ever have this in our mind and in our actions to be like him." Again, he filled us with love, with empathy, with hope, and I think we need to more than ever have this in our mind and in our actions to be like him. I became very disillusioned with religion. Um, and I think part of it was just when you have freedom, when you're, the deal with my parents, my father is, like I said, he's an agnostic and an atheist, depending on the day. And my mom is a very hardcore Catholic. And, my mom and I fought over a lot of things, people who commit suicide go to hell. I disagreed with that. She says, "But it's in the Bible." Was it? I don't know. Maybe. I admit, never read the Bible from cover to cover. Did go to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. Went to church every Friday with the school. Went to church every Sunday with my mom. And then, after I got out of grades, or after I was out of junior high and I went to public high school, it was still basically 4 years of more church. And because, I was going for my confirmation, which is the first year you're learning, the second year you're learning and preparing, and in the second year you get confirmed. So I had done all my sacraments through the church, and then I chose to stay on as a youth group leader, and I loved it. I loved it. It helped me with a lot of things in my own life that I was going through. And I mean, I don't have a problem with God. I'm a polytheist, and what a polytheist is somebody who believes in more than one deity. But I always say that because, I used to say I'm a lapsed Catholic. I just think I'm a non-practicing Catholic. I don't have a problem being baptized Catholic. I don't have a problem going to church from time to time. But, I do have a very vast spiritual table. Well, not vast, but I have a spiritual, board, and God is the CEO of my spiritual board because that's who I'm familiar with. Now, what's interesting is all my friends who are non-believers, they they accept that. They're like, hey, that's great. You do what you got to do, and we're not going to judge you for that. And there are some people who will, but I've been fortunate enough to find the people that are on the path that I'm on, a more spiritual path that I'm on, and they're okay with what I practice and believing in God along with other deities. Now, a lot of the Christian people I know, that's wrong. You can't do that. And I'm like, well, why? And I actually had this conversation with someone, and I said, well, what about all the other religions in the world? Like the Buddhists and the Hindu and the Muslims. Well, the Muslims actually believe in God; they just call him Allah. But just the other religions that don't focus, that aren't God based, right? Well, they're wrong, and that's what's wrong with this world. Seriously, I mean, Buddhism is Zen. Buddhism is literally just Zen, right? So, oh no, it's okay. It's okay, Sammy. Don't worry about it. You can always watch it later. Trust me. I got a little preachy. But I'm focusing it all in on what Pope Francis was trying to teach us. Just how to be, if you're going to be Christian, live like a Christian. Don't pick and choose what you want to from the Bible. And that's what somebody else said. It's like, some people pick things from the Bible and throw it at people like bricks. The way I say it is, people like to pick up the Bible and hit people with it. That's not what was the intention of the Bible. I stand by this. The Bible was written by men. It's supposed to be the word of God, but also, in the other teachings of my life, like I said, I grew up in a very interesting household because, I grew up with a person that did not believe in God because religion had let them down seriously. I'm very hard. That it was just kind of like, nope, I'm out. But my mom said I would be raised Catholic. I was baptized Catholic about a month and a week after I was born. And I was raised Catholic, and but my dad said, the minute she turns 18, you can't. Well, my mom took that to a new level because I turned 18 in January, and I still had to do everything until I graduated from high school. But and even then, she kind of Catholic guilted me, right? That's the big joke. There's Jewish guilt and there's Catholic guilt. And so all the mamas. But no, but there are some people who truly believe that the Bible is meant to keep people in line. And if that's the case, fine, not a big deal. So let's see. Oh, I never knew that. So Sammy says, I'll be watching later to hear the whole thing. And yes, I've been arguing with folks for years about their pick and choose attitude. Do you eat shrimp? The Bible tells you not to. Oh, I did not know that. Oh, I like fried shrimp. I'm not a big shrimp cocktail fan. I know now we're getting into the other sidebar, but that's a good point. The Bible tells you not to do a lot of things, but people still do it, right? Because again, people pick and choose what they want to from the Bible. And that bothers me. If you're going to live by the Bible, live by the Bible, but don't hit people with it. Because if there's one thing I've always said, Jesus loved everybody. Jesus didn't hate gay people. The Bible may make you think that, but he didn't. Don't use God, don't use Jesus, and don't use religion because of your own insecurities, because of your own hangups, because of your own things that you may not be able to face in your life. Don't. Because that's not what it's for. When people sit there and say we should fear God, I don't believe that. I don't believe God is a God to be feared. I really don't. God is supposed to be all loving and all kindness, right? All encompassing. And people say, well, I want to live in his image. Well, if you're going to live in his image, you're going to have to accept people that you may not agree with, that you may not like. And for what reason? Because you were taught that? We're not taught, we're not born to hate. We're not born to judge. We're taught that. We learn these things throughout our life. And even if it isn't our direct people that taught us this, my parents always taught me to not be a racist. They always taught me not to be a racist, that everybody is equal. And I get it. I'm a half-breed, okay? My mom is Filipino. When my mom would get a tan, my mom would be dark, really, really dark. In fact, this is one of my favorite stories, and I'm going to sidebar this, okay? So, my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Payne, was married to Mr. Payne, and Mr. Payne happened to be an African American. Mrs. Payne was white, white as day, and their son was like me, just, a mixed race kid. And so it was funny because we had just gotten back from Hawaii. It was time to meet our new teachers. My mom comes in. Mr. Payne and his son were there hanging up stuff. And I had the biggest crush on his son, on their son. He was cute. Obviously, he was an adult, and I'm just this kid. But. But see, Sammy said it. I am a mutt. I am a mutt. I call myself a half breed. It doesn't bother me. But yeah. Mr. We, like I said, we just come back from Hawaii, and my mom, if you've ever seen a picture of my mom was already tanned, like naturally tanned. And when you put her in the sun for like 2 seconds, and she would get about 3 shades darker. And Mr. Payne was so cute. He walks up to my mom. He's all, Mrs. Lucas. He's all, you're darker than me. He's all, and I'm a black man. He's all, how did you do that? And she's all, I'm Filipino, and so it was really funny, and it was really cute. And it was just such a beautiful interaction. But if you would have that interaction nowadays, people would go, excuse me, depending on where you're at. So, we really need to tuck in our judgy tails, all right? And just love each other for who they are. We need to stop being so sensitive about certain things too. I mean, there are jokes I remember growing up with that are really off color now and not wise to repeat. But there are other things that we used to say, and it's just kind of like, really, that hurt someone's feelings. And maybe it's just because, when you're born a boomer and a Gen Xer, a late boomer, like Sammy or older sibling, and one of my other friends. And when you're a Gen Xer and even a Gen X millennial, you grew a thick skin. It was a different time. It was, the 60s were a volatile time. The 60s were kind of all over the place. The 70s is when everything was kind of calming down, but it was still all over the place, and everyone was doing drugs to get through it. So, we come by it honestly. We literally come by it honestly. But let's see. Sammy says, tell you not to wear mixed materials. It's crazy. Jesus never said a single word against gay folks. Thank you. And Sammy knows, because Sammy goes to church. Well, I mean, not because she goes to church, but Sammy knows. Sammy knows the Bible. I know. My dad's all, what did we send you to school there for? I'm like, I know, right? Because I said every year at the same time. If you go to a Catholic church, it's always basically, the only thing that really changes from year to year. And like, if you went to church on April 15th, all right, and you went to church on April 15th the next year, it's probably going to be the same reading. The only thing that really changes is the homily and the priest. So, and the homily is just kind of the sermon, the gospel, or not the gospel. That's actually something read from the Bible, but it's the sermon, and that's okay. That's okay. That's how some people go. Yeah, Sammy says we had all the hippie influence, which I'm actually thankful for. You and older sibling. Older sibling loves, she's like, I was a flower child. I wasn't a hippie. But she protested when she was old enough to, when she was old enough and her parents couldn't tell her no anymore. She would go out and protest. So I think there's a bit of a little flower child hippie in her. But yeah, she's like, you were turning into a flower child. And it's like, you know what? I used to be so offended by that, but now I'm not. I want to fight for what's right. This Pope that we had, Pope Francis, gave me hope. He gave me courage. He gave me, the strength that even my mom couldn't give me, because, see, Sammy says, I have actually read the Bible, the whole thing, which I don't think most people have. No, most people haven't. My dad did. And my dad, even though my mom was the hardcore Catholic, my dad knows the Bible. My dad knows the Bible. I won't say what religion he was in that pushed him away from God and religion, because it's a pretty, but Sammy's right. Or should I have said most Christians haven't read it? Most Christians won't. I mean, they look at the Bible and they go like, that's a lot of pages and very tiny words. But that's the thing. It's like, I really do want to read the Bible from front to back, no matter, regardless, because I am curious. But we've only ever read passages, right? That's all we ever get. And I think what the Pope was trying to be, I think who Pope Francis was trying to be, was a person that brought everyone together, whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, whether you are someone who is agnostic, an atheist, a believer, whatever, you know, whether you're non-practicing or practicing, whether you're Catholic or Baptist or Methodist or Protestant or Lutheran, he didn't care. His whole message was love one another. His whole message was basically the teachings of Christ, right? Be kind to one another. I saw the greatest meme the other day, and it was just, it was just, a bunch of little sheep over here, and they're all, well, we didn't kick him out because, or we didn't kick him out because blah, blah, blah. And they showed Jesus holding a sheep over his shoulders that has the transgender flag on it. And it says, but he says, but I chose her. I mean, it was Jesus seeing somebody for who they are. So what gives us the right, especially Christians, to judge other people? Did you know I was watching a documentary and the majority of strip clubs are in the South along the Bible Belt? Interesting, right? The Bible Belt. Okay, did you hear all that? The Bible Belt. And I'm sure they have some reason. But let's see. Sammy says some of it with all those weird rules, and it's really hard to slog through. I read the Quran last year too, just to see what it actually says. That's interesting. Look at this girl. This girl is like a theologian. A theologian. She just, and I love it. That's one of the reasons why I read the book on Buddha, because I was so curious, right? I actually said it. It's like if I wasn't a Catholic, I'd probably be a Buddhist, because they're so Zen, and I really need to be Zen. Like I said, the book I was reading says if you choose this path, you have to choose a path of positivity. So even on my Facebook, it's probably going to change a little bit, because I realized that the way to combat ignorance and stupidity and just plain, ignorance and cruelty is with kindness. Oh yeah, she says, yep, and the Klan is based in the Bible Belt. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Proud Boys, Klan. Those are what we call here Christian nationalists. Yeah, they're the ones who take what they feel like taking from the Bible and then just throwing them like bricks at people. Probably literally. They write it on the bricks and throw it through people's windows. What happened to us? I guess I really can't say that, because when you really stop and think about it, we haven't changed over thousands of years. Religion is still a problem. It's just nowadays, it's like we're fighting the new crusades, right? Except at this time it's just in modern day, and it's being fought a little bit differently, not on a battlefield, but in social media, in governments, in all these people who think they're righteous. And just because you stand in front of a church, holding up a Bible for a photo op, doesn't make you religious. Step inside the church, okay? Step inside the church. Go to church every Sunday. If you want to be that person that's going to hold up a Bible for a photo op, you better fucking be going in that church. Excuse my language, but you better be. I don't claim to be a good Christian. I don't claim to be a good Catholic. I was baptized a Catholic. I walk more of a spiritual path now. That doesn't mean that I'm a good person every day. I sin like everybody else, I'm sure. I try to live a better life. I try to be a good person. I try to live a good life. And the more I learn about Pope Francis, that I've learned over the years before his passing last week, or just the week before, was that, I finally felt seen by the Catholic Church. I finally felt that somebody got it. I felt like, I remember when he gave the whole thing backing the LGBTQ community. I'm a straight ally to the community. I have a lot of friends who are gay, and I have a lot of friends who are non-binary, who pretty much fit under all of these different things. I used to know someone who was transgender. The only reason we don't talk anymore is because, it ended badly with he and one of my friends. But that doesn't mean I would disregard who they were. Not at all. You could meet someone who's transgender and never know. Never know. And then what do you do if you find out? And Sammy says it, and you better be reading the book you're holding and beating people over the head with. Amen, sister. Amen. 100%. You're going to hold up that Bible, you sure as shit better have read it. Seriously. And again, I apologize for all the swearing, especially since we're talking about Pope Francis, but he'll love me anyways. Um, but yeah, we want to be good people. Stop judging people. All right. Don't whisper behind people's backs. Don't, I will say this. I will say this. People will sit there and go, well, you had some issues, that you had with some of your own people. And it's like, yeah, I did. But everything I said it to their face. And I would do it again because, like I said, the person I was defending was the person that needed defending. I wasn't going to double down because of family or anything else because, somebody messed up. Somebody messed up hard. And here's the kicker. It's something they needed to do. It's the big mess up they needed in order to start fixing things in themselves. Now, whether they choose to fix it all the way, I don't know. But I would defend the person I defended again, over and over again. Because that was the innocent person in everything. That was the innocent person in everything. And I did get some backing. I did get some backing on that. And I'm not going to go into any more details on that because it's kind of water under the bridge now. But if I'm going to say something right to someone's face, because that's kind of who I've become. And it's not because I want to be, arrogant. It's not because I want to be, in your face. I just figure if you're going to say something about someone, say it to their face. Because if you're not willing to say it to their face, then it's probably something that's not true or something where there's a bigger story that you don't know about. Again, people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. In the Bible, we would equate that to, he who has not, sinned may cast the first stone. No one's throwing that rock that day. We've all done it. If you're driving down the street and you start yelling at the car in front of you, that's kind of a sin because you're yelling at somebody. That's malice, right? That's anger, and hey, I probably sin like 5 times a day, if not more, and I don't even think any of us really realize it because they're just things that we do. If we're going to live completely by the Bible, this would be a very boring world. All right. Yeah, it's like Sammy says. Yes, if you can't say it to their face, then don't say it at all. And don't whisper it to other people. Just talk to the person. Ask them what's going on. Instead of just drawing your own judgments and your own conclusions. Ask them. Bottom line it if you have to. But if you're a Christian and you're going to walk the walk of a Christian, I highly suggest you get to know Pope Francis. It doesn't matter that he has passed on. He left a legacy, 12-year legacy of so much for us to learn from. So much for us to learn from. He was encompassing. He was welcoming. He was all loving. He was a man who fought for the little guy. He was a man who, he didn't, shun the luxuries of the Vatican to make a point. He had just lived that way. A lot of Jesuit priests do live that way. And it was just comfortable for him. So we can look at it as him shunning all this thing and, who knows? I mean, the next guy might say, I'm going to live in the papal palace. Hey, you know what? You earned it. You earned the choice to take the salary. You earned the choice to where you want to live in the Vatican City. That's your choice. And he made his choice. And I don't think that he would have, really wanted people to care about the fact that he did shun the luxuries. That was just who he was. He, was older sibling and I talked about it one time. It's like, what would you do if you were a multimillionaire? And it's like, you talk to all these people, right? And it's like, oh, I buy this huge mansion and I do this and that. And like sibling and I are like, I don't know. She's like, I buy another Highlander. And I'm like, oh yeah. It's like, I want a 4Runner or a Sequoia because those are really nice cars. And we're so basic, and it's not because it's, we don't know how to live frilly, right? It's because it's just like, you love what you love. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. And I really think that's what Pope Francis wanted people to understand. I don't think he really cared about the fact that he died with $100 to his name. I don't think he really, worried about what people were going to think, because he wasn't buried in the Vatican. He was buried in a place that brought him peace and brought him joy. He was laid to rest there at the place that brought him comfort. It was the place he chose because it was special to him. It meant something to him. And yes, he really, really, I'm sure, loved being the Pope because he made so many changes. But he didn't say, hey, you have to live by protocol. No. Pope Francis gave us a way. He showed us a path, no matter what religion you are, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you believe or not. And his whole message to everybody was to just be a good human to one another, love one another, be accepting of one another. I always tell people that the only people I hate are ignorant people. And I shouldn't even say I hate ignorant people, because I am sure if Pope Francis came down from heaven right now just to talk to me, he'd say, those are the people that you need to love the most. Because those are the people that are probably the most lost. Hey, who knows? That sounded pretty profound. Maybe that did come from him. But, I don't know. One can only hope, right? Ooh, the Pope talked to me. But but it doesn't matter. And I'll be honest with you, I did pray. I prayed before this episode because I wanted, to make sure Archangel Gabriel, who I love, was right. I love all my archangels. You prove it right there, okay? But like I said, I'm more of a spiritual path now as opposed to a religious path, but I do pray. And I prayed for guidance on this, that I would not screw it up. I would not screw it up. So you can take that as you want, because I'm sure I said a lot of things that people will disagree with. You can take that however you want, but I know that I had guidance, and I really, Archangel Gabriel is the messenger angel, and I was just like, please give me the right words to say. I'm not sure that the F-bombs were all theirs, but what can I say? But yeah, Sammy says he left a beautiful legacy. Bless him. Seriously, he did. He left a beautiful legacy that all of us can learn from, that all of us should learn from. Yeah, she says, that's so true. The ignorant need a whole lot of love, even though it's hard. But it is so hard. Oh, why? Don't agree, Sammy. Don't agree. Be on my side. And maybe that's the problem, too. Sometimes we back each other up for the dumbest things. Even though we know we're wrong, we'll just double down. But yeah, it's the truth. Maybe that's the message of the whole show. The ignorant are the ones who need the love, the most love. And I think that's why a little bit of my Facebook page and some of my other stuff, it's going to be a little less political now. There's enough people fighting the good fight for me, for all of us. And I need to put in the love. I need to start flipping my script and putting in the love and stuff, because that's, that not just, I was going to say that's what Pope Francis would have wanted. And, for all the people in the world, I would do it for him. Like I said, I'm a non-practicing Catholic. I don't really, I shy away from religion now in itself, but I do try to walk a spiritual path, and it's okay to have spiritual leaders to guide you on this. So, I do hope that the conclave picks a really good pope that will continue the work of Pope Francis. As people, whether we're religious or not, we should love one another. We should be accepting of one another. I kind of got my ass handed to me with the whole ignorant thing, right? I did. And, I believe that was meant to happen, because it was a reminder for me to remember that, hurt people, right? And I think some people are hurt people that are hurting people, and they will use politics, they will use religion, they will use whatever they can get their hands on, because it is not a normal trait for them. And that's the only way they know how to expend that energy, that anger that's inside of them, that darkness, that shadow. And And so I think, what I just learned for myself is that, we shouldn't pick and choose who we love. If you're going to love the person who's done no wrong, you should probably also love the person who needs that love. And, ignorance is, some people will say ignorance is bliss, but for the radical, like the just the mean people out there, the mean people are the ones who need the most love, because somewhere in their life they're lacking it. Somewhere in their life it's missing. And I think that was one of the things of the legacy that the Pope left, is we can't just pick and choose. If we can't pick and choose what we want to from the Bible, we also shouldn't pick and choose who we love and don't love. So, I'm not saying go out there and have a love fest for bad people. I'm just saying pray for them. If you're a person that prays, pray for them. If you're a person that gratitudes or manifests, with the universe, then, gratitude that they change their behavior, that they find a way to heal their behavior. Let's just try to put a little more positivity in this world. This man, again, spent 12 years on this planet, and he really changed the face of Catholicism in, you know, in such a short amount of time. And if I'm kind of probably speaking out of turn here, but, Catholics have over 1 billion members of the church. So it is probably the biggest church. And that's why the Pope is so, you know, um, well known, whether you're, a Catholic or not. Everybody knows who the Pope is, even if he doesn't make a difference in your life. Everybody knows about the Pope. I mean, my dad is asking me, so have they seen the smoke yet? And it's just like, no, I don't think they start doing that till after the Pope has his funeral. So it's probably already started, and we'll see what happens, right? It's like, is it going to be a day where they're, I can't remember the white smoke and the black smoke. I think the white smoke means they have a Pope, and the black smoke means no, nothing yet. I can't remember. It's one of the two. All right, I have to look that up. I know, I'm such a bad Catholic. But I mean, you got to remember, guys, I'm 52 years old, and this is only the third Pope in my life. So, that says a lot. Pope John Paul, hey, that man had a huge legacy. He was Pope for like 30 something years. So let's just, like I said, whatever you lean into, whatever your beliefs are, let's just try to put good into the world. Let's put better into the world. So, Sammy says, just think, if all 1 billion Catholics acted like Francis, they could change the world. Damn straight they could, right? So I guess it's up to Sammy as a Christian and me as a non-practicing Catholic to start that trend, right? Let's start that trend. Let's just be kind to people, be nice to people. If someone's having a bad day, now I'm not saying you're not going to knee jerk or trigger. All right, let's be honest here. We're human. We're going to react sometimes, and reacting is just a part of our nature. But how we react and how we carry it on is another thing. So, I'm not telling you that you have to be good 100% of the day or 100% of the time, because I can't even do that. All right. I am not superhuman. And, yeah, power to the people, baby. Sammy's a power to the people. Yes. So yeah, let's just, this is hard. This is hard because I'm like, oh my God, I got to be nice to people I don't like. Uh, no, you don't have to seek out these people. All right. You don't have to seek out people that, you would just rather not be around. But you can, like I said, if you pray for them. Pray that they find whatever healing they need, or, to help them find their way back to whoever they are, or, manifest gratitude, whatever, like I said, whatever you turn your focus to, whoever your higher power might be. Okay, I don't have a judgment on religions. You practice however the heck you want. That's up to you. I'll continue to follow my spiritual path because that's the one I'm on. I'm not perfect, not even close. I tend to actually underestimate the power of me a lot, and I put myself down a lot. So I should probably stop doing that too. But like I said, just be kind. All right. Pope Francis gave us a legacy to think about. He gave us a blueprint of the kind of people that we can strive to be, the kind of church that the Catholic Church should strive to be. They set a lot of examples for a lot of people without even realizing, I think without a lot of us realizing how much influence they really do have. And this was a man who was accepting of everyone. So, like I said, um, if if you feel like you haven't sinned, you can cast the first stone. But if you throw that stone, you sure shit better make sure that you were squeaky clean. Straight out. Straight out. And I don't think any of us really has a right to throw that stone because we're all human. We're not perfect. And that's okay. I love being perfectly imperfect. I mean, I embrace my humanity every day, whether I'm going down the street and yelling at someone who cut me off and almost took out my car or whatever. But I catch myself faster and I'm like, oops, okay, it was just a bad, whatever. So, yeah, let's just take it one moment at a time, right? Just be a good person, be a good human. I have a friend that says that to her son every day, be a good human. And I think that's the best advice that we can give everybody. Be a good human. All right. So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. Please, please, please take care of yourselves today. And, like I said, if you yell at someone or, through your windshield or whatever, you have a bad moment or you knee jerk or you have a trigger, don't shame yourself. All right. Just take a deep breath, collect yourself, and do what you need to do to make the situation right if it was on you, or just walk away if it wasn't on you. Okay. Because you deserve your peace as well. All right, but let's go out there and be good humans. Okay, I'll see everybody back here tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live. All lives are public. Tomorrow we're going to talk about menopause. That's right. We're going to talk about, we're going to start talking a little bit about taboo things. And I know that menopause shouldn't be taboo, but it kind of is. And today, just as a preview, baby sibling and I were talking, and she's all like, "Boys have it so easy," and my nephew's like, "No, we don't." Yes, boys do have it a lot. Even my dad was like, "Yeah, we do have it pretty easy, don't we?" But yeah, see you tomorrow. Love you too, Muddy. And thank you everybody so much for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great day.